We're now getting to the real point of the Law of Moses, because even though we've just been talking about it as though it had three distinct parts, and although it's common for teachers to divide it like that for the purpose of analysis, it's important to realize that the Law of Moses is actually one single and indivisible unit. All 613 rules functioned as one unit, and I can't stress that enough. In Basic Theology, Charles C. Riney states, the Jewish people either did not acknowledge the threefold division, or at least did not insist on it. And so when you read the Bible, you'll notice that all of the different kinds of law are actually mixed up with one another. For example, in Leviticus 19:18 we read, do not bear a grudge or seek revenge, which is a moral command. But then in the very next verse, in verse 19 we read, do not plant your field with two different kinds of seed, which is a social law. So you have a moral command running straight into a social command with no clear distinction or separation between the two types in the text. The fact that the Law of Moses was one indivisible unit meant that if someone broke one part of it, they actually broke all of it. In other words, if they kept 612 of the rules but broke the 613th, they were actually guilty of breaking the entire thing. And it didn't matter whether they broke a moral, ceremonial, or social part, because it was all an offense against the exact same law. We do that today as well, actually. Take our civil law not to murder. That is a moral law. Do not murder. But then take our civil law not to break the speed limit. That isn't a moral law, it's a social one. It's not any more immoral to drive at 61 miles per hour than it is at 60 miles per hour. But whether someone murders or breaks the speed limit, we use the exact same expression in both cases. We say that they have broken the law, singular. The same authority has been offended by each transgression. And it's the same with the Law of Moses. Whether someone broke a moral, ceremonial, or social law, it was an offense to the exact same authority, that is, God. And because of His holiness, God punishes all sin in the same way, by death. Now imagine if someone tried to get out of a speeding ticket by saying to the police officer or the judge, well, yes, I was speeding, but I haven't murdered anyone today, so I think you should let me go without a speeding fine. How would the police officer or the judge respond to that? They would say, well, it's good that you haven't murdered anyone, well done, round of applause, but you have still broken the law, and therefore I have to punish you for the crime that you have committed. I still have to give you the speeding fine. In other words, keeping a number of other laws does not excuse you from the crime that you have committed. You can't atone for breaking a rule by keeping the rest. If you break one, whichever one it is, you're deserving of punishment for that transgression. In the same way, the people of Israel couldn't say to God, yes, I have broken one law, I admit it, but I've kept lots of the others, so I don't deserve punishment. God would say, well, it's good that you've kept lots of them, but I still have to punish you for the one that you have broken. You have still sinned. And again, God's punishment is death. What I'm trying to communicate here is that if there is a law, the only way to fully satisfy it is to keep it perfectly. And if you don't satisfy it to the very last detail, you're deserving of punishment. For Israel, all transgression of the law meant death. So even keeping 612 of the laws and breaking just one was enough to condemn them. So really, someone who only broke one of the rules was in no better shape than someone who broke them all. They would both be under the exact same curse of death. They would both be headed for the exact same punishment. The Bible says, cursed is anyone who does not affirm and obey the terms of these instructions. So if we can be stark about it, and this is really the bottom line, the Law of Moses actually put everyone under a curse of death, because literally not a single person could keep all of the 613 rules perfectly, in fact not even half of them. And this was the real point of the Law of Moses, to show people that God was so righteous that they couldn't possibly attain His perfect moral standard by their own efforts. They would just keep on slipping up. And that without the sacrificial shedding of blood for their sins by another on their behalf, they themselves would have to die. Remember, not a scrap or a shred of sin can exist unpunished in God's universe. Otherwise, He's no longer just. Otherwise, He's no longer holy. Otherwise, He's no longer God.